Can I say it's a privilege being here, particularly on country, and particularly in the conversations that we've all been having. We're not going to talk much today. What we want is questions from you. It's more important that we hear your views, hear concerns that you may have, or clarification that you wish to seek. But first of all, I'd like to just acknowledge, before I turn to the panel, members of the expert panel who are here: Timmy Jawa Barungwa, Fred Cheney, who is a member of that panel, Lauren Ganley, Marcia Langton, Noel Pearson, Rachel and myself. All of us were part of that early step and the early process that led to subsequent work. Where you'd be aware that John Howard was the first Prime Minister to look at the need to recognise Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in the Constitution. He took forward a question to a referendum, but it was extremely complex and waxed lyrical, and it was lost. The Australian people did not support it. That commitment continued under Prime Minister Rudd. He met in Northern Australia, in this region, and made a commitment to, again, going back to addressing the gap in the Constitution. Prime Minister Gillard continued that, and she appointed the expert panel to undertake work and consult around the country to seek the opinions of both Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and broader Australians. And there were 5 recommendations that are reflected in the report of the expert panel. It was it was presented to the Prime Minister, and in the last Parliament there was a committee convened, a joint select committee convened under the chairmanship of Senator Trish Crossing, who was a senator for the Northern Territory. Both Rachel and I had the privilege, along with Nigel Scullion, of being on that committee. Following an election, everything falls into abeyance, and it's up to the next Prime Minister to make a decision to continue the work that was led under the last government. And Prime Minister Abbott made that commitment, and of course the panel you see is tasked with going out across Australia and seeking the views and opinions of all involved. We have 14 to 15 million Australians who are on the electoral roll. The Constitution, and most of us do not read this document, is something that we hear about, but very few of us ever read it. If I use the analogy of football or sport, in sport we have a rule book, and we abide by the rules of that rule book until they're changed. The Australian government has the Constitution as its rule book and abides by that, and sometimes we are challenged in decisions we make. And in the chaplain's challenge recently, the High Court, who is the umpire, found that we had not, as a parliament, adhered to what's required in the Constitution. So the journey of recognition is seen as a process of not changing the Constitution, but adding to the Constitution that missing component. And that is the first peoples of this continent who've been here for somewhere between 40 and 60,000 years. And let me introduce members of the panel. Senator Nova Peris, you know, she is the Deputy Chair of the panel. The Honourable Shane Newman from Queensland has a legal background and has contributed significantly to the technical and legal points that are required to be considered. Senator Rachel Seward, who is with the Greens and often reminds all of us it's not bipartisan, it's multi-partisan, as you heard yesterday. To my right is Stephen Jones, who again has a legal background, has brought to the table his legal knowledge and experience. People missing today are the Honourable Christian Porter from Western Australia, Senator Bridget McKenzie from Victoria with the National Party, Senator James McGrath from Queensland, and Senator Anne Ruston was with us until she had an elevation into a new role. The advice of the expert panel, led by Mark Liebler and Patrick Dodson, was very clear. It had key points about developing an awareness and bringing Australians with change in the Constitution, or the value adding. we've been tasked with also thinking about the success of the 67 referendum and the importance of that, and the way in which it is viewed. The overwhelming support that was given by Australians to the 67 referendum was outstanding. As you are all aware, we've had 44 referendums, only 8 have been successful, but the most successful one was the 67 referendum. The second milestone, and these are key milestones in Australia, was the Paul Keating address at Redfern, in which he acknowledged the disparities of the past and the history. The next was the apology, and then we now have the opportunity of adding to the journey of where we have been to where we are coming now. This morning, none of us will give any speeches. As I said, we will listen to the questions, and the panel members in rotation, or those who wish to lead on it, will provide you with answers or reflect on your comments. But I'd now like to hand over to John Anderson. John, I didn't serve with in the Parliament. I've heard a lot about his commitment to the work that he does at the community level, his passion, and when he was appointed to undertake the role of the panel that he chairs, I knew that the Minister had selected somebody who listens, who sits in the ground and talks with people and shares his thoughts and listens to theirs respectfully. So I'd like to now hand over to John Anderson.
Ken, thank you very much for that introduction. Can I say at the outset that it's a great privilege and a real joy and a source of interest to me to be here on and in this country and to have the opportunity to interact with you. If I could say at the outset, Ken, thank you for your introduction. There's one tiny little thing you got wrong. I'm not the chairman of the committee. We're 3 equals. We don't have a chairman. There's only 3 of us. Richard Eccles, who can't be with us because of a funeral from Canberra, he's from Prime Minister and Cabinet, Tanya and me. And our job is a limited but I think important one. I got a call a few months ago from Nigel Scullion, of course from the Northern Territory himself. He was part of my team when I was leader of the National Parties. Today he is, of course, the Minister for Aboriginal Affairs. He said, the government is trying to work through the best way to ascertain the readiness of the Australian people to embrace constitutional recognition of Aboriginal people and to ascertain the best way to take the whole thing forward. We don't want this little panel that we're asking you to be part of to work on the wording so much as the readiness of the Australian people and how to engage them, how to get them involved in it. And so that's what Richard Eccles and Tanya Hosch and I have been trying to do. For me, it's an enormous pleasure working with both of them. And I'd like to say of Tanya, what I admire about her so much is her very deep commitment to her people and to seeing real progress in a whole range of areas, including in this one. You have a real champion here, someone who feels very deeply about what she is doing, and I salute her for that. Can I just say something about, if you like, the politics of all this? We have to put this above politics. I am not normally a person that would be seen as a champion of constitutional change. Can I say that? I'm not. And as you know, most attempts to change the Constitution have been voted down by the Australian people. But on this one, for a whole variety of reasons, I would love to see an enormous outpouring of what, for a better term, a sort of form of words, might be described as a spirit of generosity by the Australian people to put right something that has gone wrong. To go back to the framers of the Constitution, I'm one of those people, and some of you may not share my view, who think that broadly speaking and overwhelmingly, in many ways, a range of people from across the political spectrum, from left to right, got most of it right. But again, across the political spectrum from left to right, they got one area wrong. They misunderstood and undervalued the importance of the Aboriginal people in our community. So just as there were people right across the range politically who got it wrong then, we need to be right across the political spectrum prepared to forget the politics and get it right together. Can I put that to you? For my own part, I represented a seat, the fifth highest Aboriginal population in Australia. I got to know many, many people, and it was a really very interesting and important experience for me. I come from the northwest of New South Wales, and I found the other day a copy of a book by Ian Idris called The Red Chief. And it's one of the very few complete life stories we have of an Aboriginal hero who led his tribe through a terrible time into a better time. I'd love to see a film made out of it. And that was a very profound experience for me reading that book as a kid. You know, in a sense, part of my motivation in all of this is that I am, believe it or not, in terms of the 1967 referendum, one of the major campaigners for change at that time was Jessie Street. Some of you will know that name. And she was my grandmother's first cousin. So I'd like to, in a way, honour the work that she put in for Aboriginal people by playing a part, no matter how small, in a further step in evolving a better relationship and a better way forward for the benefit of all. And my panel members are a little sick of me saying this, but there are always little turning points in your life, aren't there? Life's a journey. And for me, one of them was meeting a remarkable Aboriginal man at Peris about 5 years ago. His name's Les Davidson. And he stood in front of me, and without bitterness and without rancour, but with deep sadness, said, you know, I was a champion boxer. And in 1956, in the final qualifying round to represent Australia at the Olympic Games, I was told to lose. And I said, why do you want me to lose? And they said, because if you win, you'll have the right to represent Australia at the Olympic Games, but you're not going to be allowed to. And that, for me, as someone who believes that we as a people base our freedoms in an idea, a profoundly important and powerful idea, that every individual has worth and has dignity and is worthy of respect and a full place in terms of their citizenship of this country, a shocking moment. Many of us have those moments in our life journey, but that was the one for me. More than anything else, that's why I'm here today, as part of this tiny little panel, playing, I'm sure, a very small role in this whole process. But I am committed to this because we've failed the essential value that underpins the Constitution, the worth and dignity of every Australian when it comes to Aboriginal people. So I just want to say to you, I'm here more to listen than I am to talk today. I've already talked for far too long, but would love to hear from you, as I know Tanya would. Let's be pragmatic and sensible and visionary and get this thing above the mire of politics. Thanks.